Everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Ecoffee with Experts. I'm your host, Matt Fraser, and on the show with me today, I have Ron Horner. Now, Ron is the founder and president of Horner Consulting and Publishing. He has helped individuals, organizations, businesses, and corporations to create solutions for their technology needs and issues over the past 22 years. He is a graduate of the DeVry Institute of Technology with a focus on computer information systems. His experience in IT systems, administration, applications design, maintenance, implementation, and tech support. Ron, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Right on. So today we're talking about the 3 essential IT services no small business can afford to be without, including digital marketing agencies and their clients in that conversation. How important are IT services to small businesses?
I think no matter what size business you have, it's very important. More so for the small business, because in a lot of instances, you're talking about a shop that's only a single person. And if there's any way that they can somehow find ways how to automate their processes or to be able to make sure their data is protected, secured, and in the event, unfortunately, if it's required that data is recovered, that they have the tools and the means available to them to have that.
Oh, absolutely. So what do you think are the 3, and from your experience, 22 years is a long time. What are the 3 most essential IT services no small business should be without?
Well, certainly, we talked about backup and recovery. There's also security that we have to concern ourselves with, making sure that nobody is breaking into our computers, nobody's tapping information from us, that type of thing. And just overall care and maintenance in a way. I always hear about, hey, my computers are running slow. What can I do? And having that agreement with somebody to come in, whether it's remotely or whether they come on site, and take a look at your systems and see what's going on. And maybe there's some things that need to be cleaned up. Maybe there's some things that need to be improved. And then that way you can focus, as the business owner, you can focus on just making your business great, as opposed to having one more thing to worry about, meaning your computer systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think small businesses are at a disadvantage when it comes to technology?
I think sometimes they are. Most small businesses are a single person shop, maybe 2 people at most. And they're juggling so many things in the air that IT, computers, and technology in general, that's the last thing they're thinking about. They're just thinking about keeping their doors open, making their sales and whatnot, and making sure they have what they need to conduct business. And a lot of times that they're looking at technology to make things better, or to make sure that the technology they do have is working to their expectation, just falls short.
Yeah, absolutely. It's challenging being a small business owner, and having to learn about your business. And I think about the book by Michael Gerber, The E-Myth Revisited, and how he was talking about this baker who was better off before they owned the bakery because they were doing so many things. And so you mentioned something about systems. And so it's really important, I think, for, as you said, for a small business to find someone, because you can't know everything. And a small business owner to find someone who knows how to do these things that probably come quite naturally to you, or people who are tech savvy. So what do you think is the best way for businesses to find the right, small businesses in particular, to find the right IT consultants for their needs?
Well, I think the more obvious would be in the networking circles and finding out who does IT in their area. Whether it could be another mom and pop shop who just happens to specialize in technology, or maybe it is a small firm that they could get connected with and try to make sure that take care of all of their technology needs. I think for the most part, that's a good way to start. You have to do a little bit of homework to make sure that that IT entity is a good fit for you, that they're willing to sit down with you and understand your business from the technology standpoint, and to be able to be there for you when you need them.
That's some awesome advice. Do you have any examples or stories that that you could share of how managed IT services or IT has helped small businesses become more efficient and productive?
I think the one that I come across a lot lately, and this is not a slam against social media. I'm on social media. I enjoy being on social media, and it's a great way to communicate with new and current clients. But there's so many that believe that if I have a presence, say on Facebook, for example, that solves all of my internet needs. And the fact of the matter is, Facebook is very dynamic. So in this instance, if something changes on Facebook, that can basically take you out of the game as far as being on the internet.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that if you have your own website, that you can control the content and you never have to worry about it going away. That's one less thing you have to worry about.
Yeah.
It's your 24/7 advertisement, but you can still have the luxury of communicating with your clients, new and old, through other social media means, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or what have you. So that's the one thing that I run into a lot.
Okay.
As far as more computer needs, the thing that I run into a lot is I'll be at an event or I'll be somewhere and there's people that have businesses that I know, and instead of getting into a formalized situation, it's the doctor syndrome. I know you're a doctor, so I'm going to come to you and say, hey, I've got a pain right here. Can you help me out? Can you diagnose it on the spot? I have people that come up to me and say, hey, my computers are running slow, or this is going on, or I need to install this particular piece of software. Can you help me figure it out? As opposed to getting into a formalized agreement where we can say, okay, I will be your IT organization. I will come in and do whatever you need me to do. And I can do it in a fashion that you don't have to worry about. You just let me know what you need and we'll take care of it under a service agreement or service level agreement. And then that way you're secure in the knowledge that your technology is being taken care of.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, the big companies, the medium-sized companies, they all have IT departments that take care of that stuff. Whereas the small purveyor, the small business, they don't have that. And a lot of times they wind up going to friends, relatives, or people that they know, as opposed to having that agreement, hooking up with an IT agency and saying, hey, this is going on, or the agency saying, hey, I'm detecting something's going on. I would like to come in and take a look at it.
Yeah. So what are some ways people can organize their, from your experience, like what are some of the first things that you do in regards to data backup, IT, managed IT services? I guess we'll just start with managed IT services. What are some of the things small business owners should look to have taken care of off of their plate to an IT consultant, as opposed to trying to do it themselves or relying on a friend or family member who, doesn't do it full time?
Well, I think when you first decide that you want to go into this direction, you really need to take a look at the things. Just bring that person or that company in and have them look over your business and see what areas that they can take care of currently. Key things for me is backup, recovery, security.
Yeah.
If it's a situation where, computers running slow, network running slow, that's not a regular occurrence, but more so making sure that your data is protected. If you have to go back to a backup, what are the procedures required to do so? And at the same time, make sure the bad guys can't get into your data.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is your best advice for backing up data then?
I go back to the big corporate concept of make sure that your data is copied on a medium that can be transported away from your location. The fact that I can copy my Word documents onto a thumb drive and then leave the thumb drive sitting on my desk that just happens to be, say, 3 inches away from my computer doesn't do me any good if the building burns down.
True.
Whereas if I make that copy, take that thumb drive home with me, it does me far more good that way, because then I know I have the documents with me, or at least away from my brick and mortar office, business, what have you. And then if I have to recreate those documents or recover those documents, I know, oh, I've got the thumb drive at home. Let me deal with the replacing of the computer, and then I'll bring this thumb drive in and recopy all those documents back onto my new computer.
What about cloud-based solutions like OneDrive, Dropbox, Google Drive?
I think they're fantastic. In fact, I use Google Drive myself.
Yeah.
And I think they work very well, and gives you the ability of saying, okay, I want you to copy these certain folders at a certain time of day. I want you to copy them. And because Google's off site automatically, put them off site. And then that way, if I need them for some reason, I can always bring them back down, but have something scheduled on your computer that takes care of that copy. You don't even have to think about it.
So do you think, like, for instance, I'm thinking if someone uses Google Docs as a primary word processor in Google Sheets, is that enough to know that your data is in Google's servers or in the cloud, or should that also be backed up somewhere else?
I think that if you're actually doing work on documents on Google's turf, in a way, you're using the Google tools.
Yeah.
I personally like to have multiple copies of documents or files in general, just because it's a good, safe way of knowing that somewhere in the mix here, I've got a copy of that document. So I still, if you're going to be working directly on a document or a file, you should still make a duplicate of it, even if it's on your Google Drive, just to play it safe, because you just never know. And sometimes there's too many moving parts, and it's better to be safe than sorry.
Are there any tools that you can recommend or strategies for cloning the data automatically from Google Drive to, say, OneDrive or Dropbox? Is that a strategy?
That could very well be a strategy. If that's going to be the case, I would almost recommend that you have your personal computer do the heavy lifting. In other words, have your personal computer be the point of origin. And because you can still do updates and things using the Google tools that way, but make sure that you have the original, whether it's bringing it back down from the drive, from Google Drive, and then have your computer and the OneBox applications do that additional copy away from your computer off to their servers.
Okay. What about using?
They don't necessarily communicate together very well, so you've got to have that third party, in a sense, to take care of that for you.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on network attached storage devices, NAS drives?
I have one.
Oh yeah.
I am a big time supporter in it. You can't, if you're in a situation where you have to share data across offices or even within the same room, but multiple PCs or multiple devices. NASs work great for that. And you can get far more storage on a NAS than, say, you would an actual regular PC.
Do you have any specific brands what brand do you use?
I use the Seagate brand.
The Seagate brand.
Absolutely. In fact, they have a type of product called My Cloud, which simulates a cloud-like environment in your own home. And to the point where you can have it configured in such a way so that not only the PCs in your home have access to it, but also mobile devices.
What about you brought forth the earlier you brought forth the subject of, like, if you have your computer and the thumb drive is right near you, could that same, and your house burns down, you lose your data, could that same principle be applied to NAS drives? And if so, what should people consider doing?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you've got to get the data away from you as far as possible.
Yeah.
And I know that there's technologies out there, Google Drive, Microsoft products, Azure, even Amazon Web Services. They have they're now touting the ability to be able to back up your files onto their servers. That way, you still have access to your data, but it's away from you in case something goes horribly wrong. And that's the key thing is that to get it into a safe place that nobody else can touch it but you. And if something terrible happens, you can always recover from it.
Yeah. So I've heard, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. For instance, if you have a NAS drive, let's say you're predominantly doing work in your office or at your place of business, like, well, just for a small business owner, I guess, like anybody who that could be. Would it be a best practice then to keep the NAS drive at their home? Or if you predominantly work out of home, would it be best practice to perhaps keep the NAS drive in someone else's house, such as a trusted relative or friend, in order to mitigate the possibility of, again, the house burning down and all the data being gone?
Well, I think I tend to prefer to keep the NAS drive on the network that you're working the most on with.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Then in terms of backing up, I would say utilize a Google Drive, or there's also third-party backup services that will come in remotely through the internet at scheduled intervals and make copies of those files and literally take them off site through the internet.
I see. So basically, personal computer to NAS drive, and then even personal computer to cloud. Is there any solutions that can take the NAS straight to the cloud? Like you go from personal computer to NAS to cloud?
Well, I know the way that I configure my NAS, it's actually part of when I go to my PC, I see the NAS as a separate drive. So it's not necessarily a separate entity. It makes it doing that makes it easier for the cloud application to just pull those files from the NAS because it's considered an additional drive to your PC.
Yeah.
And you just say, cloud duplication application, I want you to take these files and copy them off onto the internet.
Okay.
Makes it very simple to deal with.
Yeah. What about setting up multiple, like let's say you have a primary, I'm just thinking outside the box here for a minute. If you have a primary work account, Google Workspace account for your files, and you're working and you're going to the NAS, you have the NAS. And what about setting up a secondary Google account with a separate username and password that is your dedicated cloud backup? An additional cloud backup. Is that something to consider?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The options out there, there's so many options out there on what you can do to stay redundant and to make sure that you always have access to your data and that there's copies upon copies upon copies of data. You can have the multiple Google accounts, or you can have the Google box or the Google Drive and then another lockbox solution as well. So there's plenty of options to be able to do that.
Okay. Are there any tools out there that you would recommend for backup, like software tools or platforms, anything like that?
Again, for me, I'm a big believer in Google. I tend to lean that way because I also have an Android. So if you have an Android, 9 times out of 10, you're a believer in Google, I guess.
Yeah.
That's probably the way I would go. Although mostly because I haven't seen any other situations where getting into a discussion, they preferred something other than Google. But the other thing too is that we also have to speak to, are we just copying files or are we backing up our entire PC?
Yeah.
And if we're talking about backing up the entire PC, then we may want to look into a solution where it is a true to life archival tool. And there's plenty of them out there. Unfortunately, their names skip me right now, but there are solutions out there that will make a mirror image of your PC in its entirety and take it off site. Where it's copied over the internet. There's several solutions out there for that. So I kind of also look at the volume situation of what you're trying to back up. If you're just backing up some files or several files, a Google Drive, not a bad thing. If you're trying to mirror your entire PC, now we have to look into a heavier duty solution, but it's still the same construct. It's just you're sending more volume of files and data over the internet.
So let's talk about that for a minute and explore that. There's two things we're talking about here for our audience. We're talking about right now backing up computers and backing up data. Let's talk about for a minute backing up computers. For instance, there are solutions out there, or I know of solutions out there, but I'd like to know your thoughts on this of solutions that can make incremental backups of your entire computer. Mm-hmm. In the case of disaster recovery, like ransomware, or because we touched on viruses earlier and malware and ransomware and all that nasty stuff, that will incrementally back up your computer and then be able to recover to the point where before you got that thing happening. Is there tools that you recommend, or is there a strategy that you recommend for that part of data backup and mitigation?
The strategy I go with is something you alluded to, the incremental backup, where when you start, you take a full backup of your entire system. And then from that point moving forward, all you're doing is essentially backing up those files that have been touched since that full backup.
Yeah.
And I would suggest maybe doing a full backup, say once a month, and then during the month, do incremental backups. Then that way you've always got that full backup, as I call it, you've always got your way home. But then on top of that, you're only backing up those files that have been touched since that last full backup.
So go ahead.
No, I was just saying, as far as tools goes, I'm not really, the requirements that I've had to fulfill have been more on the file level, not very much on the PC level. So I'm not really sure of the tool sets that are available out there.
So just curious, like your thoughts on like Ease US to do backup or Macrium Reflect or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on those, or are you familiar with them? Or I don't know.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not.
Okay, no problem. I was just curious. That's all. Okay, so we talked about the PC disaster recovery and then the data. In regards to data, you mentioned cloning. I know there's a predicament that businesses can get into where the data is merely cloned, for instance, from the computer to Google Drive, or even the computer to Google Drive, and then it's cloned on the NAS. But if they delete it off their computer, it's deleted off of Google Drive and it's deleted off the NAS because it's mirroring. So what is the strategy then for keeping data is growing. People are getting data all the time. What is the strategy? Like, should people have a place where, like, for instance, I have a phone. Every darn picture I take is in Google Photos. Now that's great. It's there forever. And then automatically they're backed up to OneDrive. And the problem that I run into is there's photos, like screenshots I take that I'm just taking them for short-term reference, and I delete them. And I delete them off Google Drive or off Google Photos, but they're still in OneDrive. And it's like, okay, that's great if I accidentally delete something. I hope you see where I'm going. If I accidentally or didn't mean to, but then all of a sudden I have this huge amount of unnecessary data storage that I'm paying for. Like, what's the strategy or that you would recommend for solving that or handling that?
It's a hard road to go down because I know for myself, I have that pack rat mentality of, okay, I may not necessarily need it on my immediate computer, but I'd still like to have it someplace just in case I need to go back.
Yeah.
I think we have to buy into the notion of, if we say we don't use a file for a certain period of time, and we tell the maintenance routines that go out to say, okay, if I haven't touched this file in, say, 6 months, make it go away. That's always an option.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you want to have that pack rat mentality and keep every file and every picture and whatnot, you can do that as well. Unfortunately, though, eventually it's going to hit the pocketbook because somebody somewhere is going to say, you need to buy just a little bit more space for the amount of files you have out there. So it's either, so you're going to have to pay somewhere, whether you're paying for the additional space or you're paying for the time to go out there and delete all the stuff that you don't use. It's just a matter of which area you're going to have to pay into.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so is there a strategy? So here's my question. Is there a strategy or a setup or some tips you could recommend for like not just cloning, but actually backing up? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, for instance, you're cloning your files, and then if you delete it, how do you avoid that so that your files are actually backed up whether you want them or not?
I think the key thing is that if you're going to do that, and that's more syncing than anything else, I would suggest that if you're going to do a true to life backup scenario, don't have that same backup or any other process go in and delete anything.
Okay.
Because the core issue is that if you're actually looking to create backups, it's not so much that you're keeping a file, document, picture, whatever, someplace else to be used somewhere else. You're making that backup for recovery purposes, and you never want to delete from your recovery source. That's one area.
Absolutely.
The other area.
Oh, absolutely. I was agreeing with you.
Yeah. The other area is if you're just putting files someplace. So say it's easy for me to take a picture on my phone and then go to my computer, go into a Google Drive and pick up that same file that was synced from my phone. That's kind of a different method of use. So I think we have to make the clear distinction. Are we backing up our data for recovery purposes, or are we just simply copying our data to a third party somewhere where then later on through a different device, I can access that document, file, picture, what have you?
Yeah. Those are two different processes, aren't they?
So absolutely.
The thing to consider is the actual backup process. So, yeah. So what about the recovery process? Like, what's the best advice for recovering data?
Usually with recovery, the idea is hopefully you never have to. That means you've been lucky enough to never have any kind of a tragic situation. But if for some reason you have to recover data, usually the service that you're connected to will provide you with a means to do that recovery. If it's just simply you have to recover a file and it happens to be on Google Drive somewhere, that's easy enough. You just simply log into Google, go into the Google Drive, pick the file you want to download to your PC, and it will download it for you. It's very simple. Where you're going into a backup service, there might be a few more hoops to jump through because of the way that they store the files, but that would have to be something that you would work out with them when you're selecting that backup provider. They would give you like a program that you would run that would potentially access your area within the massive hard drive or hard drives that they have. And then you would select whatever files you would need.
Well, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see small businesses making when it comes to data backup and recovery?
Thinking that they don't have to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Thinking that it's not something I can think about right now. Whereas the reality is it's probably one of the first and most critical things to think about, because you got to look at it from their perspective. They're busy working their business. They're busy trying to improve their business. They don't necessarily have the time to worry about technology. But the problem is, just like with a business plan that every business should have, technology plays a part in it. And if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. And if you're going to say use a computer for, say, your finances or some other critical item of your business, you've got to think about the what if. What if my computer decides to go nuts and shuts down? Or what happens if my brick and mortar burns down, or there's some other natural catastrophe that happens? How am I going to rebuild my business? And it has to be part of the thought process of what if. And unfortunately, I find a lot of small businesses that's not in the realm of discussion.
Wow. Are there any horror stories you could share in general terms about businesses falling into that trap? For instance, I know of one business that in order to save money, didn't use a Google Workspace ecosystem, the paid version for their staff, but instead allowed them all to use their own Gmail addresses. And the churn rate in this industry is quite high. And one of their employees made a promise to a customer that they shouldn't have made, and it went to court. The customer took the business to court, and the customer had the evidence in court, and the judgment against the business was 15 times the amount of money as what Google would have cost per month for several years. So I'm just curious, do you have any stories like that that you've encountered where technology, not thinking about technology, has cost them more than if they would have just taken care of that issue in the beginning?
Oh, I mean, and unfortunately, there's a lot of them out there, right? It's the situation of it's the last thing ever thought about. Unfortunately, I lean towards the natural disaster side because I've run across businesses that have said, we've had a fire, whether it's just in the room that the computers and the electronics sit in, or unfortunately the entire building burns down, and they're trying to piece things back together again. And unfortunately, for the insurance that having a backup strategy would have given them, it was the last thing on their minds. And they had a very hard time rebuilding the business.
Wow.
Because of that.
Sucks. Yeah.
And they were in this one example that I'm thinking of, they were a graphics design company. So everything was on their computer. And for some reason, they were busy doing their thing and running their business and being successful, but they never thought about what if. And unfortunately, what if hit them and hit them hard. So there was a lot of projects that they had in the works that ultimately they had to redo in their entirety because of that. So thinking of backups and things, it is incredibly important, particularly if you're in the type of business where you're working heavily on computers to start with. So you're already halfway there. You've got the files, you're working on your computer. It's just an extra step to just make sure all that gets backed up.
Absolutely. Do you think that the pandemic accelerated opened people's eyes to the necessity of technology and making sure that these things are set up?
I think so. I mean, it really casts to the forefront the ability to communicate with others. Zoom meetings, if you will, or a lot more texting and a lot more communicating through the computer. And especially when you're talking about groups of people working together and sharing files and such, that has become so important. Even with before the pandemic, it was one of those topics that was kind of in the ether and it was kind of interesting to work with. But the ability to isolate oneself but still work within a group made it incredibly important.
Absolutely. Have you? What are your thoughts on cybersecurity and internet security processes? For instance, have you ever, what are some common? I guess I'll be more specific. What are some common cybersecurity threats that are faced by small businesses?
I think a lot of times what when I hear about cyber issues within the small business community, a lot of it speaks to email servers getting hacked, or social media accounts being hacked.
Oh, wow.
And because what's so critical is the communication that a business has with its clients, new or current. And if that message is skewed in any way because of some foreign entity or somebody wanting to play a prank or something along those lines, it can really hurt a business big time. And so, and the free advice I give to everybody: change your password. Every time I hear about people getting hacked on Facebook, change your password. Well, what do I change it to? Make it long, make it smart. In other words, collection of letters and numbers, little and big letters, and special characters. If somebody's going to attempt to break into your stuff, make them work for it.
Well, what about, how can people keep track of all that? Do you have any recommendations?
I have, I use, there are several password management tools out and about, one of which I use called KeyPass, which is actually free software. And it's been a great tool to me. And what's really nice about it is, basically you can store all of your passwords and all of your logons into it in an encrypted database. Yeah. And what's even really nice is, the biggest challenge about passwords is making them up. What's nice with KeyPass is it will give you suggestions on what to make your password, and they make them long and complicated.
Yeah. What about, how does KeyPass work? For instance, if you're on your computer somewhere and you want to log in and you're logged into Facebook, but what about if you need to work remotely or from some other location, like your phone or tablet or remotely in another city?
Well, what's nice with KeyPass is that you basically can. It's not everything is stored within like Windows construct. It's stored into an external database. Oh, okay. So you can take that database and copy it to, say, your Google Drive, for example. Oh. And whatever PC, computer, a mobile device you have that you have the ability to load a copy of KeyPass on, you can bring that file, that database, down to your phone or whatever the device is, and open it using that copy of the KeyPass software. So there's many different versions of the software. It can be put on phones, be put on PCs, and all you need is the database and knowing how to get into it.
All right, on. Are there any tools or recommendations you have for protecting computers, like internet security software or things of that nature?
I tend to lean toward Kaspersky for internet security. They've really improved it, and they've made it far more faster. And it will, I know for my use and what I've seen, what I've worked with clients on, it will tell you right away if it thinks there's anything going sideways. It runs incredibly fast. It runs in the background. Will communicate if you've downloaded a file and it thinks it might be a little sketchy. And it does all the necessary PC scans and whatnot to make sure that what's currently on your system, if it didn't come through the internet, if it happens to be that you're plugging in a thumb drive or some other device, it will say, hey, this is a good drive, or the files on this drive, everything's good, go ahead and proceed. Or it will tell you, look, there's a problem with the file. Let me know if you want me to take care of it.
What about protecting computers from unauthorized access? Any thoughts on that?
It goes back to the passwords. Okay. Make sure your computers are secure. Make sure the password's a strong enough password so that it can't be guessed. In other words, birthdays, names of children, social security numbers, not the best move.
Okay. What about using two-factor authentication?
I think that's a critical piece is the education, making sure that people understand how the tools should be used, and how to and what to look for. Unfortunately, you can't trust everything coming at you. Sometimes you have to say, look, it's not always a good idea when you see the picture in the email to click on the picture. Sometimes you have to say, I don't know where this came from. I didn't ask for it. I need to delete this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, what is one big takeaway you want listeners to get from this episode?
That, it doesn't matter the size of company that you create a part of, whether it's small business, medium business, big corporations, you should make sure that you have the resources you need. The technical resources are out there. It may require a little bit of homework to find the perfect fit for your organization, but it is so critical to make sure that you utilize technology the best way you can, and not to have to worry about you being the expert. Bring the expert in, just like all these other companies do, and they can really help you ultimately to have the same goals as you do, making your business great.
That's awesome. Hey, how can our listeners connect with you, Ron?
My website, hornerconsulting.com, is always out there and available. I'm always making updates to it, and we do have a blog that I try to keep updated. I also am on various social media, Facebook, Instagram, so you can always check me out there too.
Right on. Hey, Ron, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate having you.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. You have a great day.
You too.